The confrontation. Daniela Mercer straightened her blazer as the elevator climbed to the top floor of Horizon Technologies. Her first week as executive assistant to Harrison Wells, Silicon Valley's most notorious perfectionist, had been a baptism. By fire, at 32, she'd worked for demanding executives before. But Harrison's reputation preceded him: brilliant, exacting, and utterly merciless when it came to professional standards. "Good morning, Ms. Mercer," greeted Olivia from reception. "Mr. Wells is already asking for you. Third time in 10 minutes. Daniela nodded, unfazed. "Thanks, Olivia. I brought you coffee." She placed the extra cup on the desk and continued toward the corner office, its glass walls revealing Harrison pacing while on a call. Gesturing sharply, she'd landed this position after her predecessor had quit mid-presentation, leaving Harrison to handle the Tokyo investors alone. Daniela had been temping in legal when she was suddenly pulled upstairs. Without preparation, she'd stepped in, organized his chaotic notes, and helped secure a $20 million deal. Harrison had offered her the permanent position, the same day, with a salary that made her eyes widen. What he hadn't mentioned was the expectation that she'd essentially abandon her personal life. Harrison ended his call as she entered. The Westridge proposal needs a complete overhaul by tomorrow morning. Their CFO hated our pricing structure. Didn't look up from his tablet. I need you to stay tonight. Probably late. Daniela checked the calendar. Tonight is the deadline for the Peterson acquisition documents as well. I've already arranged for those to be completed by 6. Then you'll start Westridge after. I need both. He finally glanced up, his steel blue eyes showing surprise when she didn't immediately acquiesce. At 40, Harrison still maintained the intensity that had built his empire from nothing. His dark hair was just beginning to gray at the temples, which somehow enhanced his authoritative presence. "I understand the Westridge proposal is important," Daniela said carefully. "I have a prior commitment this evening that I can't break." Harrison stared as if she'd suggested they conduct business in Martian. "Excuse me? I'd be happy to prioritize it first thing tomorrow morning. Can come in early?" "That's not how this works," he interrupted, voice dangerously quiet. "When I say something is needed, it's needed, period." Daniela felt her heart racing but kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Wells, I excel at my job during work hours. I've already streamlined your calendar, reorganized your filing system, and prepared comprehensive briefs for your meetings tomorrow. I've completed everything assigned to me with time to spare. Now I'm assigning you this," he countered. She took a breath. "With respect, sir, I believe in work-life boundaries. My father is receiving an award tonight for 30 years of teaching. I promised I'd be there." The silence that followed was glacial. Around them, other employees pretended not to eavesdrop while stealing nervous glances. "No one says no to me, Miss Mercer." Harrison's voice was controlled, but his knuckles whitened. Around his tablet, "I'm not saying no to reasonable work. I'm saying no to sacrificing important personal commitments when alternatives exist." Daniela maintained eye contact. "I can have the Westridge proposal on your desk by 9 tomorrow, polished and improved. Or you can accept rushed, exhausted work tonight from someone who's resentful about missing a milestone family event." Harrison's jaw tightened. For a moment, Daniela was certain she'd just ended her brief tenure at Horizon Technologies. Then something unexpected happened. A flicker of ... was that respect crossed his face before vanishing behind his usual mask of authority. 9A.M. Not a minute later, he turned back to his desk, and it had better be flawless. "It will be," she promised, turning to leave. "Ms. Mercer," he called after her. She paused at the door. "Tell your father congratulations." His eyes remained on his work, but the small acknowledgement wasn't lost on her. As Daniela returned to her desk, she noticed the stunned expressions of her colleagues. No one had ever negotiated with Harrison Wells and walked away unscathed. Just done the impossible, and now she had to deliver on her promise. The gauntlet had been thrown. This was only the beginning. Unexpected respect, the Westridge proposal sat on Harrison's desk at 8:45 the next morning, 15 minutes ahead of deadline. Daniela had arrived at dawn, fueled by determination and the warm glow of her father's celebration. She'd reworked the entire pricing structure, adding comparative market analysis and flexible tier options that hadn't been in the original. Harrison arrived at precisely 9. His tailored charcoal suit, immaculate as always, He nodded curtly too. Daniela before disappearing into his office. She continued organizing his schedule, refusing to hover anxiously or check if he was reviewing her work. An hour passed before his voice came through the intercom. Ms. Mercer. A moment. She entered his office prepared for criticism. Instead, Harrison was leaning back in his chair, the proposal open before him. It's unexpected, he said, tapping a section she'd completely restructured. You found a way to maintain our profit margins while addressing their concerns about scalability? I noticed their CFO comes from the nonprofit sector, Daniela explained. He's thinking about long-term sustainability, not just quarterly numbers. Our original proposal felt predatory to someone with that background. Harrison studied her with newfound curiosity. How did you know that about their CFO? I did some research last night after my father's ceremony. Stanford Business Review did a profile on him last year. She maintained a professional tone, though part of her wanted to savor this small victory. Impressive, he admitted reluctantly. The Westridge team wants to meet again tomorrow. I'd like you to join us. This was unprecedented. Executive assistants didn't typically attend high-level negotiations. Of course, Mr. Wells. As the weeks passed, a peculiar pattern emerged. Harrison would test her boundaries, demanding weekend work, expecting immediate responses at midnight, and Daniela would calmly but firmly decline when these requests crossed her clearly established lines. Yet for urgent matters that truly couldn't wait, she'd make exceptions without complaint. What astonished everyone was Harrison's reaction. Rather than firing her as expected, he began to adapt. When he needed weekend support, he started asking instead of ordering. When late nights were unavoidable, he'd acknowledge her sacrifice. You're playing with fire, warned Trevor from marketing over lunch in the company cafeteria. He's just waiting for you to slip up. Olivia shook her head. I disagree. I've been here 5 years, and I've never seen him actually listen to anyone before. Daniela shrugged. I'm just doing my job the way it should be done, with boundaries. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, said Trevor. The entire executive floor is less stressed. It's been almost ... reasonable lately. It's a real test. Came 3 weeks later, during preparations for the annual shareholders meeting. Harrison was obsessing over every detail, his perfectionism in overdrive. These projection slides are too cluttered, he declared, pacing his office at 7 in the evening. We need to start over. Daniela examined the presentation they'd been refining for days. What specifically concerns you? All of it. It's not compelling enough. His frustration was palpable as he ran a hand through his hair. The board needs to be convinced our new direction is sound. Instead of immediately agreeing, Daniela sat down. May I speak frankly, Mr. Wells? He gestured impatiently for her to continue. You're not dissatisfied with the presentation. You're anxious about facing shareholders after the Phoenix project delay. She spoke calmly but directly. The slides are excellent. Rebuilding them won't address your actual concern, which is that you need to own that setback while emphasizing our stronger than projected revenue in other divisions. Harrison froze, staring at her with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Daniela wondered if she'd finally crossed a line. Then he sank into his chair with a sigh that seemed to deflate his imposing presence. That's perceptive, he conceded. Too perceptive. It's my job to understand what you actually need, not just what you ask for. She spoke softly, recognizing the rare moment of vulnerability from a man who prided himself on appearing invulnerable. After a moment of silence, Harrison nodded. Show me how you'd address it. They worked side by side for the next 2 hours, restructuring his speech to confront the Phoenix issue directly before pivoting to the company's strengths. The presentation remained largely intact, with only strategic adjustments as they finished. Harrison asked unexpectedly, Your father, what does he teach? Surprised by the personal question, Daniela answered, Physics. At Berkeley. You have his analytical mind, Harrison observed, and his backbone, I imagine. He always taught me that respect isn't earned by saying yes to everything, she replied. Harrison smiled. The shareholders' dinner tomorrow night. Will you attend? It's not typically part of my role, she said cautiously. I'm aware of that. His eyes held hers steadily. I'm asking if you'll come. Your perspective would be valuable. The invitation hung between them, shifting something in their professional dynamic. This wasn't an order or even an expectation. It was a genuine request. In that case, yes. Daniela agreed. I'd be happy to attend. As she gathered her things to leave, Harrison added, and Daniela. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Thank you for your honesty. It's refreshing. Walking to the elevator, Daniela realized the office had emptied hours ago, yet for once staying late had been her choice, not an obligation. More. Surprisingly, she'd glimpsed something beneath Harrison's controlled exterior. Man who might actually be capable of growth. The question was whether that glimpse revealed something worth exploring further, or a momentary aberration in an otherwise unchangeable personality. Tomorrow's dinner would perhaps provide some answers. Beyond the office walls, the shareholders' dinner transformed the austere hotel ballroom into a showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with arrangements of white orchids and silver candelabras. Daniela arrived wearing a midnight blue dress that she'd splurged on during her lunch break. Suddenly conscious that her usual professional attire wouldn't suffice for this gathering of Silicon Valley's elite, she spotted Harrison immediately. Even in a room full of powerful people, he commanded attention. Engaged in conversation with an elderly gentleman Daniela recognized as Victor Pembroke, Horizon's largest individual investor, Harrison glanced up, his conversation faltering momentarily. When he saw her, he excused himself and crossed the room. You came, he said, as if he'd half expected her to decline. I said I would. Daniela accepted the champagne flute a server offered. Your speech is prepared and loaded on both the main system and your tablet as backup. Harrison nodded but seemed distracted. That's not why I asked you here. Before he could elaborate, they were interrupted by a striking woman in her 50s, with impeccable silver hair. Harrison, darling, she said, air-kissing his cheek. Aren't you going to introduce me to your lovely companion? Evelyn Harrison replied with practiced cordiality. This is Daniela Mercer, my executive assistant. Daniela, Evelyn Winters, CEO of Winters Media Group. Ah, Evelyn's smile cooled slightly. An assistant. How dedicated of you to attend business functions. Daniela matched the woman's polite but dismissive tone. The dedication goes both ways. Mr. Wells values diverse perspectives in strategic discussions. Evelyn arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Indeed, how progressive. She turned back to Harrison. We must discuss the potential media partnership before the Tokyo expansion. Call my office. With a final assessing glance at Daniela, she glided away. Sorry about that, Harrison murmured. Evelyn tends to categorize people by their perceived usefulness, Daniela finished. No apology needed. Something like amusement flickered in Harrison's eyes. Their mistake. As dinner commenced, Daniela found herself seated not at a peripheral table as expected, but directly beside Harrison at the main table. Throughout the meal, she observed him navigating the complex social dynamics with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations. When conversation turned to Horizon's new biotech initiative, Harrison smoothly redirected a technical question. To Daniela, who had extensively researched the project, Ms. Mercer has been instrumental in coordinating between our research division and marketing, explained, yielding the floor to her. Surprised but prepared, Daniela articulated the initiative's potential with such clarity that several board members were taking notes by the time she finished. Harrison watched her with unmistakable approval. The evening progressed smoothly, till Harrison's phone buzzed during dessert. His expression darkened as he read the message. Excuse us, he said, abruptly to the table, gesturing for Daniela to follow him to a quiet corner of the ballroom. The Singapore server cluster just went down, he said in a low voice. It's taking our entire Asia-Pacific network with it. Need to leave, now. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Horizon's nearly empty headquarters, where the night security team ushered them to the crisis management room. The CTO and 3 engineers were already there, faces illuminated by multiple screens displaying cascading system failures. Targeted attack? Harrison asked immediately. Shh. Not malicious, replied Grace Wong, the CTO. Physical failure, cooling. System malfunction in the Singapore data center. Without cooling, the servers are shutting down to prevent damage. Redundancies should have prevented this, Harrison said. His voice deadly calm, the calm Daniela had learned preceded his most volatile moments. They would have if the backup generators hadn't failed too, said one of the engineers. It's like someone deliberately disabled all our failsafes simultaneously. Or someone was criminally negligent, Harrison countered. Every minute we're down costs us millions and damages client trust. Get me the Singapore center manager, now. As the situation spiraled, Daniela observed Harrison's mounting tension. His shoulders became rigid, his commands increasingly clipped. When the Singapore manager's explanation proved unsatisfactory, Harrison's control began to slip. Your incompetence might have just cost us the Takata contract, he snapped. I want your resignation by morning. The atmosphere in the room grew suffocating. The engineers exchanged nervous glances, clearly afraid to speak up. Daniela moved quietly. To Harrison's side, a word, Mr. Wells? Privately. In the hallway, Harrison turned to her with barely contained fury. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, she interrupted gently. You're right to be concerned, but firing the center manager won't fix the servers. He failed at his one job, and publicly humiliating him is preventing everyone else from doing theirs, Daniela said. They're afraid to propose solutions because they're watching you look for someone to punish instead of a way forward. Harrison stared at her, momentarily speechless. You hired these people because they're brilliant, she continued. Let them be brilliant. They need direction, not fear. For a long moment, Harrison was silent, his internal struggle visible. Finally, he exhaled slowly. What do you suggest? Give them clear objectives. Reroute Asia traffic through our Tokyo backup center. Have the legal team draft client communications, and then investigate what happened after we've stabilized operations. Harrison studied her face, then nodded once. They returned to the crisis room, where Harrison addressed the team with renewed focus. Here's what we're doing, he announced, outlining Daniela's suggested strategy while adding technical specifics. The tension in the room dissipated as everyone received clear assignments. Hours passed as they worked through the night. Organized communication chains, ordered food for the team, and kept Harrison supplied with information and coffee. By dawn, they had restored 80% of network functionality. As the crisis subsided, Daniela found Harrison in his office, staring out at the sunrise over the bay. He looked exhausted but calmer. The Tokyo rerouting worked, she informed him. We'll have full restoration within 3 hours. Harrison nodded, still gazing at the horizon. My father would have fired half the department tonight, he said unexpectedly. He believed respect came from fear. And you? Daniela asked quietly. He turned to face her. I'm beginning to see alternatives. A pause. Thank you for redirecting me. The simple acknowledgement, coming from a man notorious for never admitting weakness, felt monumentally significant. It's nearly 7, Harrison noted. Go home, get some rest. Take the day off. Are you going home too? She asked, knowing the answer. A faint smile touched his lips. Apparently unpredictable. No, I'll oversee the final restoration. Then I'll stay too, Daniela decided. We started this together. Something shifted in Harrison's gaze, a recognition, perhaps, that they had moved beyond the conventional boundaries of their professional roles. Neither acknowledged it directly, but as they returned to work side by side, both understood that something fundamental had changed between them. The office walls had come down, revealing not just colleagues, but a listened, possibly something more complex and undefined that neither was quite ready to name. Crossing lines, the weeks following the Singapore crisis transformed Daniela and Harrison's working relationship. Their seamless collaboration during the emergency had created an unspoken trust that carried into their daily interactions. Began seeking her input on matters beyond her administrative role, while Daniela found herself increasingly invested in Horizon's strategic direction. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Daniela knocked on Harrison's open office door. The quarterly projections you asked for, she said, placing a folder on his desk. Thank you. Harrison glanced up from his computer. Have you reviewed them? Took the liberty, she admitted. The biotech division numbers seem optimistic given the FDA timeline delays. Instead of dismissing her observation, Harrison gestured to the chair across from him. Show me. They spent the next hour analyzing the figures together, their heads bent close over spreadsheets. Harrison no longer bristled when she challenged his assumptions. Instead, he seemed to welcome the intellectual sparring. You should have studied business instead of comparative literature, he remarked, referencing her undergraduate degree. Literature taught me to recognize narratives, Daniela replied, including the ones companies tell themselves to justify risky decisions. Harrison's mouth quirked in what had become an increasingly familiar, almost smile, touche. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. Olivia appeared with an elegant cream envelope. This was hand-delivered for you, Mr. Wells, or Harrison. Opened it, his expression darkening as he read. The Governor's Innovation Gala is this Friday. I'm receiving some Technology Leadership Award. That's on your calendar, Daniela confirmed. Black tie starts at 7. Your acceptance speech is already drafted. I hate these things, Harrison muttered. Pretentious ceremonies where everyone congratulates themselves on being visionaries, says the man with an office wall covered in awards. Daniela observed dryly. Those are different. They're industry-specific, based on measurable achievements. He tapped the invitation irritably. This is political theater. It's also an opportunity to secure state support for the clean energy initiative, she reminded him. The governor's backing could expedite the permits we need, Harrison sighed in resignation. You're right, as usual. He hesitated, then added, Would you accompany me? The question hung between them, weighted with implications beyond professional duty. To manage logistics, Daniela asked carefully. No. Harrison met her gaze directly. As my guest. The distinction was significant. This wasn't a business function she'd attend as his assistant. He was asking her to accompany him personally. I'd be happy to, she answered, ignoring the flutter. In her chest that warned of complications ahead, the governor's mansion glowed with golden light against the evening sky as Harrison's car pulled up to the entrance. Daniela smoothed her burgundy gown, a full-length silk creation that had consumed an alarming portion of her savings. Ready? Harrison asked, as the driver opened their door. She nodded, accepting his offered hand as they ascended the marble steps. Harrison looked devastating in his tuxedo, his usual commanding presence enhanced by the formal attire. Heads turned as they entered the grand ballroom, curious glances following them as Harrison kept his hand lightly against the small of her back. People are staring, Daniela murmured. Let them, Harrison replied. I'm escorting the most intelligent person in the room. The evening unfolded in a blur of introductions and conversations. Harrison kept Daniela at his side throughout, introducing her not as his assistant, but simply by name, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. She noticed how differently people treated her in this context, with curiosity, sometimes deference. Occasionally thinly veiled speculation about her relationship with the notoriously private tech mogul. During dinner, the governor's wife leaned toward Daniela. How long have you and Harrison known each other? It's almost 3 months, Daniela answered truthfully. The woman's eyebrows rose. Only 3 months. You seem so... in sync. Before Daniela could respond, Harrison was called to the stage to receive his award. His acceptance speech was characteristically brief and focused on innovation's responsibility to solve real-world problems. It's not just create profitable technologies. When he acknowledged his team at Horizon, his eyes found Daniela's in the crowd, his lingering for a moment that felt intensely personal. Later, as the orchestra played and couples moved to the dance floor, Harrison turned to her. Would you like to dance? The question shouldn't have surprised her after an evening of crossed boundaries, yet it did. Dancing seemed irrevocably personal, a step beyond their carefully negotiated professional relationship. Yes, she said simply. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her among the other dancers. Neither spoke as they moved together, the unacknowledged tension between them building with each step. Everyone is watching us, Daniela. Finally said no, Harrison corrected softly. They're watching me with you and wondering what I did to deserve your attention. The unexpected vulnerability in his voice made her look up, catching an unguarded expression in his eyes before he masked it. "Harrison," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. "Not here," he murmured. "There's something I need to show you first." After the gala, Harrison directed his driver to Horizon's headquarters instead of taking Daniela home. The building was nearly empty at midnight, their footsteps echoing in the marble lobby as Harrison led her to the elevator. "What are we doing?" "Here," she asked as they ascended to the top floor. "You'll see." The elevator opened, not on the executive floor but onto a rooftop garden Daniela hadn't known existed. Lush greenery surrounded a central seating area, the city lights spreading below them like scattered stars. "This was supposed to be a corporate entertainment space," Harrison explained, "but I claimed it as a sanctuary. No one comes here but me. Until now," Daniela observed. "Until you." He moved to a small bar area, returning with 2 glasses of water. "I don't drink when I need clarity." They sat on a curved bench overlooking the cityscape, the night air cool against Daniela's bare shoulders. Harrison draped his jacket around her without comment. "I brought you here because I need to explain something," he said after a moment. "About why I am the way I am." Daniela remained silent, sensing the importance of whatever he was struggling to articulate. "My father built Wells Industries from nothing," Harrison began. "He was brilliant, driven, endlessly merciless. Failure wasn't tolerated. Weakness was despised. When he died and I took over at 28, I thought I had to become him to succeed. But you're not him," Daniela said softly. "No. But for years I convinced myself that his methods were necessary, that demanding absolute dedication, putting work above everything that was leadership." He looked at her. "Until you walked into my office and simply said no." "And you didn't fire me?" she reminded him with a slight smile. "I almost did," he admitted. "But then I realized you weren't refusing out of laziness or incompetence. You were setting a boundary because you valued yourself."
Wow.
His voice grew quieter. No one had ever shown me that was possible. The confession hung between them, raw and honest, in a way Harrison Wells had likely never been with anyone. "These past weeks," he continued, "watching you stand your ground while still excelling at everything you do, it's forced me to question every assumption I've made about what drives success." Daniela took a deep breath. "Harrison, I need to ask something important. Am I still your employee in this conversation?" He met her gaze directly. "That's what I've been trying to determine. Because if you are, then I need to stop thinking about you the way I've been thinking about you." The admission sent warmth spreading through her chest. "And how is that?" "As someone I admire beyond reason," he answered. "Someone who challenges me, frustrates me, and makes me want to be worthy of her respect." He paused. "As someone I can't stop thinking about, professionally or otherwise." Daniela felt the precipice before them, the line between what was appropriate and what was desired. Crossing it would irrevocably change everything.
Oh.
"I can't be both your employee and something else," she said carefully. "The power imbalance would make anything between us questionable." "No." Harrison's fingers brushed hers, tentative, in a way that seemed foreign to his usual confidence, which is why I've been considering reorganizing the executive structure, creating a new position that would report to the board, not directly to me. "You've thought this through," she realized. "I've thought of little else lately." His honesty was disarming. "But I won't make that decision alone. This affects your career, your future. I need to know what you want, Daniela, without consideration for what I might want. Just the truth." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and complication. Daniela had built her professional identity on maintaining boundaries, on never compromising her principles for anyone. Yet here she was, contemplating crossing the most fundamental boundary of all. "I want ... she began, her voice barely audible above the distant city sounds. "I want to explore what exists between us without either of us compromising who we are." Harrison's exhale was audible. "Then we have decisions to make." As they sat together beneath the vast night sky, the lines between boss and employee between professional and personal, seemed to blur and reform into something new and undefined. Forward was uncertain, filled with potential complications and workplace politics they had yet to navigate. But for this moment, with the city lights below and the weight of honesty between them, the only boundary that mattered was the diminishing space between their hands as their fingers slowly, deliberately intertwined. Asterisk equals at last the Monday morning following the gala. Horizon Technologies buzzed with speculation. Harrison and Daniela had arrived separately, maintaining professional distance. But rumors spread nonetheless, fueled by photographs from the governor's gala that appeared in the business section of several papers. Harrison Wells, notorious workaholic, photographed dancing with his striking executive assistant. Daniela ignored the whispers, focusing instead on the complex reorganization proposal she and Harrison had discussed over the weekend. If implemented, it would create a new chief of staff position, reporting directly to the board, with responsibilities encompassing strategic initiatives and organizational development, a role perfectly aligned with Daniela's strengths, but removed. From Harrison's direct supervision at precisely 10 o'clock, Harrison's voice came through the intercom. The board members are arriving for the emergency meeting. Please join us in the conference room. Heart racing, Daniela gathered her materials. They had agreed to present the reorganization as a purely business decision, emphasizing how it would strengthen Horizon's executive structure, so personal implications would remain private until the professional transition was complete. As she entered the boardroom, Harrison was already seated at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The 12 board members watched her with varying degrees of curiosity as she took her place at the opposite end, a deliberate seating arrangement that symbolized the shift in dynamics they were proposing. Thank you all for accommodating this. Meeting on short notice, Harrison began. I've asked Ms. Mercer to join us because she's integral to the structural changes I'm recommending. He outlined the proposal with clinical precision, emphasizing increased efficiency and better cross-departmental coordination. Several board members nodded approvingly, while others exchanged glances Daniela couldn't interpret. This reorganization would create a direct line between operational teams and the board, Harrison continued, reducing bottlenecks in decision-making. Victor Pembroke, the company's largest individual investor, spoke first when Harrison finished. While I appreciate the operational logic, Mr. Wells, I'm curious about the timing. His shrewd eyes moved between Harrison and Daniela. This proposal comes remarkably soon after Ms. Mercer joined the company. Ms. Mercer's arrival highlighted structural inefficiencies I'd overlooked, Harrison replied smoothly. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to identify systemic problems. Indeed, Pembroke said, his tone neutral, but his gaze knowing. The photographs from the governor's gala, were those also related to structural inefficiencies? The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Daniela maintained her composure, though her pulse quickened. They had anticipated questions, but not such direct confrontation. Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. My personal engagements are irrelevant to this discussion, Mr. Pembroke. On the contrary, countered Regina Foster, the former CFO who now headed the governance committee. If this reorganization is motivated by a personal relationship, rather, than business necessity, the board has both ethical and fiduciary concerns to address. Before Harrison could respond, Daniela spoke up. May I address the board directly? After a moment of surprised silence, Pembroke nodded. I understand your concerns, Daniela began, her voice steady despite her nerves. You're questioning whether personal factors are influencing business decisions. That's not only appropriate, but necessary for proper governance. She opened the folder before her, distributing documents to each board member. What you're receiving is an analysis I conducted during my first month here, before any personal complications existed. It identifies the exact structural weaknesses this reorganization aims to address. The board members reviewed the documents with interest as Daniela continued. You'll note this analysis was submitted to Mr. Wells 6 weeks ago, with specific recommendations for streamlining executive functions. The current proposal is the natural evolution of that work. She met Pembroke's gaze directly. I won't pretend there aren't personal considerations involved in the timing. But the business case stands independently on its merits. Her candor seemed to catch the board off guard. Several members nodded appreciatively at her directness. If the board approves this reorganization, Regina Foster asked, would you be the candidate for this new position? That would be the board's decision, not mine or Mr. Wells's, Daniela answered. If you determine I'm qualified based on my credentials and performance, I would be honored. If you prefer an external candidate with more executive experience, I would respect that judgment. Harrison watched her from across the table, pride evident in his expression, despite his attempt at neutrality. The discussion continued for another hour, the board dissecting every aspect of the proposal. Throughout, Daniela addressed their questions. With the same calm competence she'd displayed since her first day at Horizon, Harrison spoke only when necessary, intentionally yielding the floor to demonstrate his confidence in her abilities. Finally, Pembroke called for a vote. The proposal has merit, he acknowledged. But I move that we table the final decision for 1 week to allow proper consideration of all implications. The motion passed unanimously. As the board members filed out, Pembroke paused beside Daniela. Impressive presentation, Ms. Mercer. Though I suspect your greatest achievement may have been convincing Harrison Wells to voluntarily relinquish any measure of control. His eyes twinkled. That alone suggests you might be exactly what this company needs. When only Harrison and Daniela remained, the professional facade they'd maintained throughout the meeting softened. You were remarkable, Harrison said quietly. We're not there yet, she reminded him. The board could still reject the proposal. They won't. His confidence was absolute. Your analysis was irrefutable. Daniela allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps, but we need to be prepared for either outcome. Harrison nodded, understanding the implications. If the reorganization failed, they would face difficult choices about their personal relationship or their professional association. Neither option was without sacrifice. The week that followed was excruciating in its restraint. Harrison and Daniela maintained strict professionalism, limiting their interactions to necessary business matters, always in the presence of others. The entire company seemed to hold its breath, sensing the undercurrents, but uncertain of their nature. On Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Daniela was reviewing quarterly reports when Olivia burst into her office, her usual composure shattered. Takeover attempt, she gasped. Vanguard Systems just announced a hostile bid for Horizon. They're offering shareholders a 40% premium. Daniela was on her feet immediately. Where's Harrison? Emergency executive meeting. He sent me to get you. The executive floor was in chaos when they arrived. Harrison stood at the center of the storm, issuing rapid directives while the leadership team scrambled to respond. He acknowledged Daniela with a nod as she entered. Vanguard's CEO is holding a press conference in 30 minutes, he informed her. They're presenting this as a rescue operation, claiming Horizon's leadership is distracted and unfocused. The implication was clear. The rumors about Harrison and Daniela had provided ammunition for the takeover narrative. What's our response? She asked. We're formulating one now. His expression was grim. This isn't just about share price. Vanguard wants our biotech patents and our Asia-Pacific infrastructure. If they succeed, they'll dismantle everything we've built. For the next several hours, they worked feverishly to mount a defense. Daniela coordinated with the legal team while Harrison spoke directly to major shareholders. The stock price fluctuated wildly as the market responded to the developing situation. By evening, it became clear that the board was divided. Several members saw potential benefits in the merger, while others remained loyal to Harrison's vision. The deciding votes would likely be cast by Pembroke and Foster. We need to meet with them tonight, Harrison decided. Both of us. Daniela understood. The risk. Appearing together before the two most influential board members could either reinforce or undermine their case. Depending on how their relationship was perceived, they found Pembroke and Foster in the boardroom, reviewing Vanguard's offer documents. This is precisely why the board had concerns, Foster said without preamble. Personal entanglements creating vulnerability. With respect, Daniela countered, Vanguard has been planning this move for months. Our Singapore crisis gave them the opening. They needed, not any personal matters. Pembroke studied them thoughtfully. Perhaps. But perception matters in these situations. The market responds to narratives, not just numbers. Then let's change the narrative, Harrison said. He placed a folder on the table.
Ow.
This contains my updated proposal for reorganization with one significant change. Foster opened the folder cautiously. I'm recommending an immediate separation of the CEO and chairman roles, Harrison explained. I'll remain CEO, focused on operations and innovation. The board will appoint a new chairman to oversee governance and shareholder relations. The proposal was radical. Harrison voluntarily relinquishing power he'd held since founding the company. This addresses the governance concerns Vanguard is exploiting, he continued. While preserving Horizon's core mission and independence, Pembroke looked genuinely surprised. This is ... unexpected, Harrison. You've resisted this separation for years. Recent events have clarified my priorities, Harrison replied, his eyes briefly meeting Daniela's. Sometimes holding too tightly to control undermines what you're trying to protect. The significance of his words extended beyond the business context, and Daniela felt their weight. This wasn't just a strategic concession, it was a profound, personal evolution. And Ms. Mercer's role in this new structure? Foster asked. That remains as originally proposed, Harrison answered. A chief of staff position reporting to the board, not to me. Her qualifications speak for themselves, but the decision is yours. The four of them talked late into the night, dissecting the proposal and its implications for the takeover defense. By midnight, a tentative agreement emerged. The board would unanimously reject Vanguard's offer and announce governance restructuring as a proactive modernization of Horizon's leadership model as they prepared to leave. Pembroke pulled Harrison aside while Foster engaged Daniela in conversation across the room. I've known you since you were a young man following in your father's footsteps, the older man said quietly. He would have fought this takeover with every weapon at his disposal, regardless of collateral damage. I'm not my father, Harrison replied. No. Pembroke smiled slightly. You've become something he never managed, a leader who understands that strength sometimes means letting go. His gaze shifted briefly to Daniela, and recognizing when someone challenges you because they see your potential, not your power. 3 months later, Horizon Technologies celebrated the successful defeat of Vanguard's takeover attempt. Restructured leadership had stabilized the company, with Harrison focusing on innovation while the new chairman, Regina Foster, managed investor relations. Daniela had indeed been appointed chief of staff, her performance silencing any lingering doubts about her qualifications. The celebratory gathering took place on the rooftop garden, once Harrison's private sanctuary and now occasionally opened. For special company events, as executives mingled and champagne flowed, Daniela found a quiet moment alone at the garden's edge. Gazing out at the city lights, Harrison joined her, maintaining a professionally appropriate distance while still standing close enough for private conversation. Congratulations, Chief Mercer, he said, using the playful title that had become his private name for her. The board's quarterly review of your performance was, quote, exceptional in all metrics. High praise, she acknowledged with a smile. Though I suspect you might be biased. Completely, he admitted. But the numbers speak for themselves. The cross-departmental initiatives you implemented have increased efficiency by 22%. Daniela turned to face him fully. In the months since their restructuring, they had navigated the complex transition from boss and employee to equals with painstaking care. Their personal relationship had developed quietly, outside office hours, and away from corporate scrutiny, building on the foundation of mutual respect that had defined their professional connection. Do you ever regret it, she asked, giving up some of your control? Harrison considered the question seriously. I've discovered something interesting about power, he said finally. When you hold it too tightly, it diminishes you. Share it wisely. It expands. His eyes held hers. So no, I don't regret it. Not for a moment. From across the rooftop, Pembroke raised his glass in their direction, a knowing acknowledgement of how far they'd come. Other executives had gradually accepted the new dynamic, recognizing that both Horizon and its founder had emerged stronger. Through transformation, I received an interesting offer today, Daniela mentioned casually. Winters Media Group is looking for a strategic advisor, Evelyn Winters called personally. The woman who dismissed you is just an assistant at the shareholders' dinner, Harrison recalled with a raised eyebrow. What did you tell her? I'm quite content where I am. Daniela's smile deepened, both professionally and personally. Harrison's expression softened in the way it did only for her, the carefully maintained public persona giving way to genuine emotion. I'm glad to hear it. As the celebration continued around them, they stood side by side, no longer divided by hierarchy or office walls, just two people who had discovered that the most meaningful connections often begin with the courage to say no, and the wisdom to recognize when that challenge is exactly what you need. In the warm evening air, the city spread below them like a carpet of stars. Daniela reflected on the journey that had brought them here from confrontation to respect, from professional boundaries to personal connection, from power imbalance to true partnership. What are you thinking? Harrison asked softly. Daniela turned to him with a smile that held both tenderness and strength. That some boundaries are meant to be maintained, she said, and others are meant to be transcended. The wisdom is in knowing the difference. Harrison nodded, understanding completely. In a world where power often corrupted and professional relationships rarely evolved into something genuine, they had found their way to that rarest of connections, one built on mutual respect, honest challenge, and the recognition that true strength sometimes begins with a simple, courageous no. And in that balance of boundaries crossed and preserved, they had discovered something neither had expected, but both now treasured beyond measure: the freedom to be fully themselves, together.